when we dive into the research, at the top level, one of the questions that we asked is, are you experiencing more or less workplace conflict in the last few years? Overall, 5,000 plus people, 46 different countries, very strong reporting. 70% of folks report that the level of conflict is the same or more than it was a few years ago. And what's interesting is in that remaining 30% who said, no, I'm experiencing less conflict. When you then ask them why, half of those folks say, well, the reason why is that they left their job, they found someplace else, or they've left the on-site workplace. They're like, so I'm working remotely now and I'm not interacting with human beings, so I'm not having conflict. Well, okay, that feels, maybe less conflict feels better for that individual, but the challenge there is all of the lost constructive, productive interaction that could be happening. One of the questions we asked was about past big conflicts you've experienced. What are those? And there are a whole range, the gamut, conflicts with bosses, conflicts with coworkers, conflicts with customers, vendor. I mean, if there's a conflict available, that just about all of them came out. There wasn't any one big one. But then we followed up and said, okay, if you could go back and give yourself some advice in that same conflict, what would you tell yourself? 55% of folks said, I would go back and tell myself, I need to be more patient. I need to remain calm. Like if I could give myself some advice, over half of everybody said that would be their advice to themselves. And then after that, it was 21% saying, hey, I'd recommend to talk about it, speak up, address it directly. And so it was interesting that 76% of people, their total advice, be patient, remain calm, and talk about it.
I think there's a lot of language of, well, that, the pandemic is behind us, but it has left an imprint on people that I think that we might be underestimating. And 21% said that is the source of the conflict, is that, this feeling of unease, of mental health, of the lingering stress. And there's a lot of reasons that came out from that. And part of that is, we all chose our bubble, right? So they created this us and them, even amongst people that we cared about. And, there was like, I'm afraid of other people, right? And so all of that and living that way for so long, I think created some sense of anxiety that is lingering. We're just living in this edge. You're on edge already, and then it's like,
So let's start with our research. When we asked people who were reporting more conflict at work for their major reasons, in addition to the mental health and anxiety, pandemic-related stress, the two number one responses were overwhelm, burnout, understaffing, all of those kinds of issues, and then poor management practices. So first, you've got the whole move to remote, hybrid, back again, not back again, all different varieties of that. Then you've got this global staring contest with mortality that was the pandemic that made a lot of people reevaluate their values, how they wanted to live, what they wanted from their work, what they didn't want, opportunities for more pay elsewhere. So you had the Great Resignation as people went looking elsewhere, or I don't like those values, I'm leaving. All of those factors add up to an increased demand on managers and leaders to lead effectively. And the skill set has not caught up with the reality yet. I'm just thinking of a conversation we had with a senior leader earlier this week. The senior leader who is very values-based, has a high degree of loyalty and trust from her existing team. And she was describing the challenges that she and her team have been having with incoming workforce who are genuinely having conversations like, what do you mean I have to be on time? And not with no irony, like that's not inclusive. That's not, and they're misusing the language, right? They're completely misusing the language, but it's been more than once that she's had these conversations. She's scratching her head saying, are you seeing this elsewhere? And it's not that it's always that, but the social dynamics with some very educated folks who are talking about the inability of those people to have some of the common human dialogue to solve baseline problems.
I think there are certainly buckets of new conflict. Do we have clarity? We're seeing a lot of conflict around unclear expectations. A lot of conflict conversations come from, I expected you to do this and you did that, right? So think about almost any conflict that you have. It's usually an expectation violation of some sort. Another one that we're seeing a lot of is a matrix environment. So I have this cocktail of, I have accountability for this result to improve, but I do not have the agency. I can't do this by myself. I've got to gather all of these different people who also have potentially competing priorities to align. And so it's not as simple as just getting something done or rallying my direct report team to get something done. I've got to now negotiate my most important things with other people's most important things.
The number one is connection. That's the first thing, is do we know each other as human beings? Then there's clarity. Karin was talking about clarity. Do we have a shared understanding of what success looks like? Next is curiosity. Are we truly interested in one another's perspectives? And then finally is commitment. And that is, do we have a shared agreement moving forward of what actions we're going to take and how that works? And there's depth in there, and there's all the different kinds of questions and the conversations we can have. But those four elements exist with increasing complexity in all the examples that we were just given. But those dimensions, if we can address those, make everything better.
One of these phrases works very well in relationships, in any kind of relationship that you ever have. I really care about you, and I am sure that we can find an outcome that will be good here. I really care about you. I really care about this team. I really care about our work that we're doing. I really care about our mission, right? If you can come from a place of, I really care about this. And the other day I was talking someone, a manager, through a conflict that he was really, really, really fired up. And I said, you know what? You both really care about this same outcome. You're both trying to accomplish the exact same thing. Now you have differences of opinion about how you're going to approach it, but I would start there, like ground in that. Go say, I know you want this. I want the exact same thing. Okay, so how can we, right? And when you can start with that, it de-escalates the conversation pretty fast.
What happens if I don't say anything? Because nothing's going to change if nothing changes. And so what happens if I don't say anything? What's at risk if I stay silent? What are my values here? What are the things that could happen or are not going to happen? Now, to really ask ourselves and take an honest look at that, because sometimes maybe staying silent might be the right call, because really, there's nearly nothing at stake here and it's just me, whatever, being silly. Most of the time though, when there's something that's irritating us, silence is selfish. If I don't say something, I am depriving the other person of the opportunity to make a different choice, to take a different path, to engage with me on that content. If I see it, I do have to say something or nothing else can happen. So that's that starting conversation with ourselves about what's possible and what's at risk if we don't speak up, I think is critical before we have word one with anybody else.
But if somebody is coming to you and they're like, I am really angry about this, I'm sorry, tell me more. And that now I have set myself up as an active listener in deep connection. And then another connection one is what we call a reflect to connect, which is where you are reflecting back the emotion. It sounds like you're really frustrated with this decision. Now, you're not saying they should be frustrated with this decision. You're not saying that you are thinking it's a bad decision. It's just saying, it sounds like you're really frustrated with this decision. Tell me more, right? So you can use these in combination. So those are some examples of connection ones. A really good clarity one is, what would a successful outcome look like for you? And if we're not trying to achieve the same thing, then we're never going to resolve the conflict. So it's better to know that as fast as you can.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. And to stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst Podcast and on Twitter at Catalyst_Action. And thanks for listening.